It was May 2005, Menzies Sports Bar, karaoke night. I ended up in one of those girly chats. And I said, it would be nice to meet a nice young man for a change. And she responded, I know a nice young man. And I said, that's what they all say. No. And she spent the next 10 minutes raving about her fiance's brother, Rob. He sounds too good to be true. Where's the catch? No catch, she says. So where does he live? In Greenacre at his parents' place. There's a catch, I said. No. And he's only moved back in to help them build the house extension. He lives out the back in the granny flat. Aww. Rob truly was a breath of fresh air. Dark hair, bright smile, big, strong hands. He was one of those guys who would wear a seaweed wig running out of the ocean. He made me laugh from the first moment I met him. According to him, it took him a split second to say, I could marry this girl. It took me about 6 weeks longer. But before Rob, I only knew those fireworks and lots of ashes relationships. And with Rob, it was this little flame that started burning brighter and brighter each day I got to spend with him. I remember the very first time I met his mum and dad. They were sitting on the couch watching TV, holding hands. My heart melted. I knew I had come to the right family. There was so much love. In October, he proposed to me on a houseboat on a Hawkesbury River under the stars. I was the happiest woman on the planet. This was Hollywood material. My heart was overflowing with love and excitement, and in March 2006, we got married barefoot on the beach. It was a dream come true for him and I, which we later discovered. We bought the house near the beach. We had 2 gorgeous boys who adored their dad beyond measure. And we were that couple. We lived a life of no regrets, a gift I received through losing my dad when I was 20. When we had the boys, I left my corporate job in advertising to be a full-time mum. And when the boys were old enough for preschool, I created my own coaching business. Life was amazing. We just loved it. It was all about love, family, and the beach. One afternoon, we walked Rob to the station. He was off to a business trip, on a business trip to Perth. And the boys were on their scooter and their bike. Rob and I were holding hands. We got to the station. I took a couple of pictures of Rob and the boys. And the train came in. We hugged, we kissed. I took a picture of the train leaving. And the next evening, we had a phone conversation about love and connection, as we often did. And how my phone didn't update properly, so I couldn't use it as an alarm the next morning. And he said, don't worry, babe, I'll wake you up. I love you. I love you too. At 4 p.m. in the afternoon, I received a phone call from a sergeant from the coroner's office. And he said, I'm sorry to inform you that your husband deceased in a hotel room in Perth this morning. Having a bilingual brain helped a tiny bit to delay the impact of that message. Up until that day, I had never heard the word coroners before. I learned fast. My whole world rushed into slow motion and I sank to the bedroom floor. It's like your happy song is playing on a record player and all of a sudden the needle screeches and the music stops. I think that's how I learned what deafening silence really meant. Yet the worst was yet to come. I had to tell the boys. There are 7 steps down to our living room. It's not a lot of time to prepare a message with that impact, a message where there is no sugarcoating. I spare you the details about the boys' reactions, but eventually Flynn, he was 10 at the time, looks at me and says, who's going to look after us now, Mum? And I said, I will. I will look after you. And I could feel how I needed to hear myself say it out loud just as much as they needed to hear it. And then Jet blurts out, "I'm only 8 and I'm not going to have a daddy anymore." The following weeks were so surreal and absolutely challenging. Yet the next day, we were off to Perth. A couple of people might have questioned my decision of taking the boys. My heart didn't. I knew I had to take them. How could I leave them behind when their dad just flew out to Perth and didn't make it home alive? I needed to do that with them. This was our journey for the 3 of us. And we slipped into an emotional cocoon that left no space for anybody else. I consider myself lucky that Rob and I had the what-if conversation a few years prior. And the conversation ended in something like, "If something was ever to happen to me, I would want you to create the happiest life possible for the boys." That's what love is. Love just wants you to be happy. Happiness felt like a farce to me, but this became my North Star. About 4 days after Rob's funeral, I walked Jet down the aisle to his first Holy Communion, all eyes on us again. Their sympathy was drowning me. And that night, I snapped. It started over some bickering between the boys. They were brushing their teeth upstairs, and whatever I yelled up to them did not settle what was going on between them. And eventually, I just shouted it out. "Boys, I just need peace and quiet." I started yelling that sentence over and over again, and every time I yelled it, I started screaming it louder and with more force, and I just fell apart. I was whacking the kitchen cupboard until everything just turned into primal screaming. It was like I could watch myself fall apart, but I couldn't stop it. And then a vision of me being carried out on a stretcher in a straitjacket just snapped me back into reality. How could I let them witness me falling apart when they've just lost their dad? I walked back up those 7 stairs to my bedroom, and Flynn was sitting at the edge of the bed, looking down on the floor. Jet was hiding under the blanket. His little face pops up. "Were you scared?" I said. They just nodded. So was I. And what followed was the most vulnerable conversation about support. And I said, "You know, how you talk to Doreen, your school counsellor, I think I need to talk to somebody too." "I think that's a good idea, Mum," Flynn said so gently. How on earth did he grow up so quickly? A few days later, I sat in Emily's office and I shared my story. I worked with her for about 4 months, and every session felt like new life was being planted in my heart. And I remember one afternoon, I'm sitting in her office and I talked to her how much of a burden it was. People expecting me to fall apart. Here am I trying everything to create the happiest life possible for them, but yet everybody expects me just to be sad and fall apart. And their empty "my condolences" line. So she asked me ever so gently, "What does grief mean to you, Marie?" I stared at her for a second and I said, "Empowerment." Wow, I did not expect that. Followed by, "I think I need to write a book about this." And she said, "I think you should." 5 weeks later, I published my very first book, and shortly after, we embarked on our trip around the world. I had to take the boys away from all these first milestones to come without Rob, the Christmas, the New Year's, their birthdays. I just wanted to create new and happy memories for them. So we snorkeled in the Maldives. We rolled in black volcanic sand on the Canary Islands. We built a massive snow dragon in Salzburg with my closest friends and their kids. And we ate escargot in Paris. That was Flynn's wish. And he looked at me and said, "Hey, Mum, want to try some?" I was like, "Oh, God, no," before I could think of anything more supportive. And then he pulled the dad card on me. He looked at me and was like, "Dad would have tried it." And so I ate escargot in Paris, and I promise you that was the first and last time, because I won't touch these slippery little suckers ever again. After a very short stint in Germany, we finished our trip celebrating Flynn's birthday at the Universal Studios on Sentosa Island. That trip certainly was a paradigm shift in grief. Resilience is not like an award that you wear. Resilience is something that you build with every single decision that you make towards healing. So when you go home later tonight, I would love to wrap up 3 gifts for you that I learned through adversity. Number 1, please have that conversation, the what if, with your closest person. Tell them what you want to happen when you pass over. Number 2, sadness and love do coexist, not just in the day-to-day living, but also in grief. We need love to hold space for us when sadness is trying to take over our heart. Don't let that happen. And finally, as of today, please promise me that you don't ever use the word "my condolences" ever again. It leaves you with such emptiness and excluded from the rest. Instead, learn to hold space, say their names, and be the love that heals the sadness. Thank you.